Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Adrian Peterson, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 14 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. And if you're watching this video right now, then congratulations. You have probably effectively made your fantasy football playoffs. You are one of the 6 or 8 teams that has successfully made the fantasy football playoffs from weeks 14 through 16, potentially week 17 for those of you who play in different kind of formats. But regardless, congratulations. I mean, it's a lot of hard work to get to this moment in time. Again, it starts from early, June, July, August, being able to prepare and kind of do some research, think about teams, then effectively draft a good roster, which is obviously difficult based on all the injuries that take place and all of the red herrings that are thrown around here and there with coach speak in the offseason, and then also make good decisions throughout the season, whether it's waiver wire, whether it's trade, whether it's start or sit decisions. You guys have done a great job, and congratulations to get here. Again, it is very difficult to do so. Now, for those of you who were not able to effectively get into your fantasy football playoffs, there's always next year. Again, the entire thing that I want to preach and always say, look, if you want to blame me for some of the decisions I've, advised, I'm perfectly fine with it. But again, if you play in more leagues, there's more of a chance that you're not going to get screwed over by an injury or this one single decision. Again, for those of you who are Christian McCaffrey owners, it was really probably a difficult, opportunity to get into the fantasy football players. Even if you drafted Saquon or Zeke, it was probably difficult to get there. And to be honest, if you played in more leagues, had more of a diverse roster, had different kind of opportunities at different teams, then perhaps you wouldn't be stuck in a situation where it was obviously kind of dead from the get-go. But regardless, either way, there's always next year. We'll see you next year. As for those of you who are here, let's talk about some waiver wire pickups. That's what we're going to cover today. We're going to be talking about waiver wire pickups at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and defensive positions for the fantasy football playoffs. Again, there aren't that many viable options at this moment in time. Even though there were some breakout performances yesterday, a lot of the performances of players were mainly players that are owned in more than 50 or 60% of leagues. So I want to go ahead and point out a couple players that are only owned in about 40 to low 50%. Even lower, some players that are even owned in like less than 10% of leagues that you might want to keep your eye on as we continue to go through the fantasy football playoffs. It is win or go home at this point. So again, it is very vital to make sure you get the most valuable prospects that can immediately help you rather than just kind of guys that'll sit around on your bench, potentially not doing much. Okay, let's get into this. Again, thank you everybody for supporting the channel. Make sure you subscribe. Again, we are on our way to 36,000 subscribers. That is the mark that we're trying to hit before the season's end. Again, if you have not yet already, we're making 2020 fantasy football content here on the daily, trying to help you guys win some fantasy football championships this season. Of course, make sure you click the like button down below and comment down below. Really does help out the channel a lot. Discord server is in the link down in the description for those of you who are interested. Also, timestamps down there. Okay, now that we've kind of gone through that intro, again, let's get into some waiver wire pickups, beginning with the running back position for week 14. We start off with Cam Akers. He had a fantastic performance yesterday, and I'm so glad that I picked him up in a variety of leagues because, again, the ability to at least have the heir to the throne of a backfield that is as valuable as the Los Angeles Rams is a very valuable prospect. I mean, thinking about the backfield, of course, they drafted Cam Akers in the second round for a reason. They wanted to have a running back that could potentially be the starter for the future. And even though majority of the season was an RBBC situation of where people were rotating based on injuries, based on the hot hand, as of right now, Cam Akers seems to have the hot hand. This is the second week in a row in which he's had over 70 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. That in itself gives me a lot of confidence, considering the fact as well that he had 22 total touches yesterday and played 63% of the offensive snaps. Only one other running back in the Rams backfield played as many snaps as Cam Akers did this entire season. It was Malcolm Brown in week 8 in which he played I think 57 total snaps in comparison to Cam Akers yesterday playing 53 total snaps in a single game. So again, they don't really give this kind of opportunity to a single back very often. And now that Cam Akers is trending in that direction, it seems to me that he is on his way to success. Now, of course, this upcoming week he takes on New England, but he is a guy that you could potentially pick up owned in only 53% of leagues that you can play not only this upcoming week, but the week after against the Jets and in the Seahawks in the final week of the fantasy football playoffs. An option, to say the very least, and a guy that could be the starter for his team going forward. We have Ty Johnson as the number 2 overall running back. Okay, so for those of you who are Frank Gore owners and don't understand what happened yesterday, on the first play of the game, touched the ball, boom, concussion. And he was out for the rest of the game. Of course, we know Frank Gore is a tank, but a concussion will take out just about anybody, and that is an unfortunate matter. But Ty Johnson came in and absolutely dominated the Raiders defense as a young second-year running back, formerly of the Detroit Lions. Ty Johnson came in and produced fantastically. He had 22 touches for 104 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, 2 catches on 2 targets for 13 yards. Similar production that I honestly thought I honestly thought that Frank Gore could potentially get to. Obviously, Frank Gore getting 100 yards and a rushing touchdown isn't in his, repertoire as of this moment in time, considering his age and the way that, he's being used in an offense. But to be honest, he could have easily had a fantastic game last week based on just how many points the Jets put up on the Raiders defense. So that being said, I think Ty Johnson, if he's going to continue to be the starter, not a bad option. Plays against Seattle this week. Seattle could not stop the run last week from the New York Giants. Again, Wayne Gallman had a fantastic performance, but got, vultured twice by Alfred Morris. Either way, Ty Johnson only owned in 2% of leagues, played 63% of the snaps. If Frank Gore's out once again, not a bad option as a starting running back. We have Adrian Peterson as our third option. Now, I don't know exactly how DeAndre Swift is going to progress going forward. Again, he had a concussion that left him out for 2 weeks, and then he just missed a week in which he was ill. Maybe that illness is going to continue to linger. There's a possibility of that. If that's not even the case, there's a chance that there could be another injury. This is kind of a handcuff scenario in which when Adrian Peterson, the last 2 weeks, has been given the starting job in this Detroit Lions backfield, he has absolutely delivered on it. This past week had 16 carries for 57 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. That's 4 touchdowns in just the past 2 weeks for Adrian Peterson. The amount of value that he is bringing to fantasy owners, despite only being owned in 48% of leagues, is absolutely fantastic. A lot of people were looking at Collin Johnson, but AP is still a stud. He's a Hall of Fame running back for a reason. He's an all-decade player in the 2010s, or in the 2000s, excuse me. But as of right now, it was in the 2010s. I don't even know why I'm saying that. I think that was with the team he was on, right? With him, Marshawn, LaShawn McCoy. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The whole point is Adrian Peterson, not a bad option going forward. If in fact you are the DeAndre Swift owner and you just want to make sure you contain that backfield and the value that sits there, because again, their matchups upcoming the next 2 weeks are very valuable. We have Cordarrelle Patterson as our number 4 option. Now, I know in many leagues he could be used as a wide receiver or a running back. As it currently stands, he's more of a running back. He gets the majority of his work out of the backfield. Obviously has the potential to, kickoff return, punt return to the house. He's done that before. The thing is, he had 10 rushing attempts for 59 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown yesterday, despite the fact that David Montgomery played 75% of the snaps, had 2 rushing touchdowns, and had another 20-point game. Again, matchups make a huge difference, and the fact that they play against the Houston Texans this week gives me so much more confidence in the potential that, if in fact they're going to give Cordarrelle Patterson 10 to 11 touches in a game. This is not the first time that he scored 10 plus points. This is the second time in the last 3 games that they've played. So again, I think that if Cordarrelle Patterson, again, if you're in a super deep league and you need a running back to come in, potentially steal a touchdown, get a couple touches here and there, maybe get some work out of the passing game, not a bad option. But again, you could tell how thin we are at the running back position that we're suggesting guys like Cordarrelle Patterson as that kind of fringe flex play. We have Phillip Lindsay as our number 5 option. So here's the thing. Phillip Lindsay had 1 less rushing attempt than Melvin Gordon yesterday, had 14 rushing attempts, but only totaled 26 yards, while Melvin Gordon had over 100 yards. That in itself is concerning. That being said, Phillip Lindsay, perhaps the plays that he was on, I was watching the game. Defensive linemen were blasting through. He was getting caught in the backfield. And even when he was trying to run people over, he's a smaller guy. Obviously, that the plays that they're kind of implementing him on aren't the greatest ones, but he did play 39% of the snaps. He did touch the ball 14 times on the ground. He did get a single target. He plays against the Carolina Panthers. We talked about it ad nauseum, to be honest. The Carolina Panthers, they give up a lot of points on the ground. Running backs typically succeed against them. And if Phillip Lindsay is to, somehow see himself extra work, and or if Melvin Gordon goes down, could be a pretty good option going forward. The last option I wanted to mention is Handcuff. Now, this is a silhouette of a player because specifically I want you to go ahead and pick up your most valuable running back's handcuff. Maybe even before guys like Adrian Peterson, Cordarrelle Patterson, or Phillip Lindsay. But again, it's going to be based on whether or not they're available, of course. Alexander Mattison or Latavius Murray or Jamal Williams. I know Adrian Peterson is technically a handcuff, but he's a higher valued one. I'm talking about guys that don't even touch the ball on a weekly basis, like a Tony Pollard. Those are the deeper ones that potentially, if in fact you are just trying to prepare for the fantasy football playoffs, make sure you have those guys rostered so that if in case something is to happen to your starting running back, you do have an insurance policy going forward. All right, that's all I wanted to mention for the running back. We can go ahead and move on to our top 6 wide receiver waiver wire targets for this upcoming week, beginning with our number 1, T.Y. Hilton. I didn't think I would get to this point to be suggesting T.Y. Hilton, but this is back-to-back weeks of fantastic performances and catching a touchdown from Phillip Rivers. This past week had 11 targets, 8 catches, 110 receiving yards, and a touchdown against the Houston Texans. Luckily for him, he plays against the Las Vegas Raiders this upcoming week and the Texans again in the following week. So again, this lineup and this potential lineup of games for the Indianapolis Colts continues to get easier. Phillip Rivers is looking fantastic. That offense looked a lot better yesterday. The defense with DeForest Buckner is obviously much improved and potentially won them that game with the safety late in the contest. But regardless, T.Y. Hilton only owned in 45% of leagues, is kind of getting back to being the number 1 wide receiver of this team. Michael Pittman Jr., those hopes are kind of flushing down the toilet, unfortunately, for someone like me who had so much high hopes for him rest of the season. T.Y. Hilton seems to be the option going forward. We have Keke Coutee as our number 2 wide receiver option. We mentioned him on Tuesday's video. So the running back video of last week, or was it the running back video? I think it may have been. But we mentioned it because, again, we'd been given information that Will Fuller had been obviously suspended for 6 games and he was going to be out. And somebody else needed to step up as a wide receiver in this offense. And of the valuable prospects, of course, Brandon Cooks was the name that kind of jumped up out as a guy that was going to step up, but he was owned in majority leagues. But we were looking for someone else to step up that maybe hadn't been owned. They cut Kenny Stills recently. Randall Cobbin went to the injured reserve with a toe injury. And Keke Coutee had been the only other wide receiver that had been a potential fantasy option in the past. I mean, if you go back to 2018, his rookie season, he had gotten himself a decent amount of work back then, and even was a viable option in the actual NFL playoffs for Deshaun Watson as a pretty valuable target. And it obviously shows 9 targets, 8 receptions, 141 receiving yards, 18.1 fantasy points, playing 79 or 75% of the snaps against the Indianapolis Colts, a great secondary. As of right now, Keke Coutee only owned in 27% of leagues. Not a bad option going forward. We have Tim Patrick. Okay, so here's the thing. Tim Patrick seems to be the number 1 wide receiver of this team. Jerry Jeudy, as many opportunities as we kind of want to give him, I think it's over for him. The fact that he doesn't play the most offensive snaps, and Tim Patrick does with 89%, the fact that Tim Patrick is seeing a lot of red zone opportunity, he's essentially become a 10-plus point play in a full PPR and about 8 to 9 minimum in a half PPR. Just seems to me that Tim Patrick is a fantastic option. And with their upcoming schedule for Denver, I honestly do think that he's going to see more and more work. He had 2 receiving touchdowns just yesterday against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. And as of right now, obviously, those kind of 2 touchdown games aren't going to be as reliable going into the future. But for the amount of targets he gets and yardage he gets over a weekly basis, I have enough hope in him that he could potentially continue to be fantasy relevant. We have Rashard Higgins as our number 4 option. Now, I did not anticipate the Cleveland Browns to come out and smack the Tennessee Titans defense as they did. I mean, they put up a bomb on them in the first half. Rashard Higgins was a huge part of that. Of course, 9 targets, 6 receptions, 95 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown, playing 68% of the snaps, just 1% more than a Jarvis Landry in that offense. But again, if he is playing as much as he is, and he's only getting, 8% of the snaps, my intention with Rashard Higgins is not to potentially play him this upcoming week against the Baltimore Ravens, even though he could be a viable option in said matchup. It is to potentially play him against the New York Giants and or the New York Jets in week 15 and 16. So even though this upcoming week's matchup against that secondary is a tougher one per se, I honestly think that if Rashard Higgins is going to be utilized as much as he was this last week in the future, then he could be of value, and that is why we mentioned him as our number 4. Number 5 is Jalen Reagor, and though the quarterback switch for the Philadelphia Eagles did take place this past weekend, I'm not 100% certain if that is going to be the best for a guy like Jalen Reagor. Owned in 22% of leagues. This is a guy that I've been mentioning every single week because, again, there's got to be somebody relevant in that offense. There just has to be. There's no way that we are going to get an offense from this team that doesn't have at least one dominant receiving option. Now, I don't know how Jalen Hurts being implemented in this offense is going to affect the running game with, of course, his ability to run the ball. Maybe it opens up gaps or opportunities for Miles Sanders because, again, the read option is a possibility. I don't know if it's going to affect the tight ends like Dallas Goedert or Zach Ertz. I almost said Travis Kelce. But what I know is that Jalen Reagor is a playmaker. He showed that last night. Even with 1 target and 1 catch, it was 34 yards. He got himself work in the running game, had an 11-yard rush, and on top of it, had a 78-yard punt return for a touchdown. So, again, he is capable of making plays. They just got to give him the most opportunity. He's playing the most offensive snaps at the wide receiver position for that team. Greg Ward did catch the lone touchdown, but I'd still think that Jalen Reagor not a bad option going forward. We have Collin Johnson as our last wide receiver option. Now, you may be thinking, who is Collin Johnson? He is owned in literally 0% of leagues right now. But as of the last 2 weeks, with Mike Glennon as the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars, has seemed to be his favorite target. He has seen a consistent amount of targets. That's, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 15 in the last 2 weeks. And to be honest, he plays against the Tennessee Titans this upcoming week. The Tennessee Titans give up just about anything that you could possibly imagine. Baker Mayfield had one of the best games of his season. Of course, it had a 5 passing touchdown game earlier this season against the Cincinnati Bengals that I recall. But to be honest, Baker Mayfield could do no wrong yesterday. And to be honest, if Mike Glennon and the Jacksonville Jaguars teams come into this matchup against the division rival and want to upset the Tennessee Titans, they could put up some points. Again, they were competing with the Minnesota Vikings, and they were giving them a tough time, giving Dalvin Cook a tough time with 32 rushes. Yeah, he got over 100 yards, but they definitely were able to bottle him up. They could do the same to Derrick Henry. I know Derrick Henry's had himself some pretty good games against Jacksonville. If you guys remember the, of course, 200-yard, 4-touchdown game a couple years back. But either way, Collin Johnson is the entire purpose of this entire segment. I just wanted to go ahead and mention him because he could be a viable option as he's getting so many targets in that offense. We move on to the tight end position as we go ahead and cover a couple players that have not played already this week. Again, this video is being recorded on Monday morning. So again, the Monday night games and the Tuesday games that are scheduled to take place for the end of week 13 have not taken place yet. So hopefully we can go ahead and just mention a couple players that will perform well this week and then carry that on into the following weeks. Of course, Jordan Reed is the first option that I wanted to mention because, again, I think their upcoming schedule is pretty nice considering this upcoming week they take on the Washington football team. That is a revenge game of sorts for him. And, of course, the Washington football team do give up a lot of points to opposing tight ends this season. Jordan Reed only owned in 26% of league. If you, in fact, need a tight end and you are desperate for one, there will be no teams on bye for the rest of the season. So, again, it is going to be a tough, ask for maybe those of you to go out and pick up a player if you already have a tight end. I'm not saying to go pick him up. I'm just saying if you are in desperate need of one, Jordan Reed is the first option that comes to my mind. Dalton Schultz, I think, is the second option that comes to my mind as of right now. Thinking about their upcoming schedule, I know they have to play against the Baltimore Ravens, and to finish off week 13. But the following week, they do take on the Cincinnati Bengals. They give up a ton of points to opposing tight ends, and that could be an opportunity. I mean, we just saw Mike Gesicki went for 9 targets, 8 catches, receiving touchdown, over 70 receiving yards against Cincinnati's defense. Dalton Schultz could be utilized in the same form. We move on, and we have Logan Thomas as our number 3 option. Again, he hasn't played Pittsburgh yet, but I still think that if, in fact, he's going to be utilized in this offense, there could be some upcoming games in which you could take advantage of his upcoming schedule. Only owned in about 40% of leagues. Again, Jordan Reed, 26%, Dalton Schultz only 20% owned, and, Logan Thomas only 40% owned. So, again, he could be already picked up in your league, but I think he's not a bad option going forward as a tight end if, in fact, you are in a pinch. We have Tyler Eifert, a couple players that, again, are going to be owned in less than 10% of leagues. Tyler Eifert's only owned in 6, and in the past 2 weeks, he is another player that Mike Glennon has kind of gravitated towards in terms of targets. He's gotten 6 targets just this past week for 6 receptions, 45 receiving yards for 7.5 fantasy points. The week prior had himself a receiving touchdown down in the red zone. Plays against Tennessee. They give up a bunch of points to opposing tight ends, even though Austin Hooper wasn't able to take advantage of it. They are a defense that, again, can be taken advantage of. And that is why I suggest Tyler Eifert as an option. Drew Sample, in the last 2 weeks with Brandon Allen as a starting quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals, Drew Sample has got a ridiculous amount of targets. Just this past week, coming off of 7 receptions on 7 targets, 49 receiving yards, and 8.4 fantasy points. If my tight end can get me 8.4 fantasy points every single week, I'd be happy, okay? Of course, if you have a Hawkinson, Goddard, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, you're going to get more. It's just a fact. Even Gronk, you're going to get more. But if you're you're sitting at the bottom of the thing and you drafted Hayden Hurst or you drafted Jonnu Smith, you drafted Tyler Higbee, you're just hoping for 8 points at this point. And hopefully maybe you can find it with Drew Sample because of the quarterback connection there. We also have Kyle Rudolph as our last option. Now, for those of you who play Kyle Rudolph and got 0 points, I'll take the blame for that. Again, I'm not going to doubt my own decision-making. I thought my decision-making was as clean as it could possibly be. You're playing against the defense that's given up 9 receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends this season alone. That's the most amongst all teams. And he doesn't end up doing anything, not even a single catch. Just seems a little sus to me. But as of right now, they do have a pretty tough schedule ahead of them. They have the hardest running schedule rest of season. And it just seems like if Kirk Cousins is playing as well as he has in the passing game, 3+ passing touchdowns, 4 out of the last 5, he could end up continuing to pass the ball in the direction of Kyle Rudolph, only owned in 25% of leagues. We move on to the quarterback position. Speaking of Kirk Cousins, he will not be on today's list because, again, he is a valuable quarterback, and we've been mentioning him for the last 3 weeks, and hopefully you've gone ahead and picked him up. But as of players that are still available in just about, 55% of leagues or less, The first name that I wanted to mention first and foremost is Matthew Stafford, coming off of a game of 402 passing yards and 3 passing touchdowns to defeat the Chicago Bears on a comeback victory. This upcoming week, they take on the Green Bay Packers, a defense that has played well, a division rival. I honestly think that Matthew Stafford, if in fact can potentially get back DeAndre Swift this upcoming week and Kenny Galladay, could be a very valuable play rest of season based on his schedule and some of the tougher contests that they have, of course, being able to throw the ball as much as they have to. We have Phillip Rivers as our number 2 option. I mean, Phillip Rivers is just a gunslinger himself. Only owned in 40% of leagues. He's coming off a game 27 for 35 passing, 285 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 on a crossing route to T.Y. Hilton for a touchdown, and 1 down the sideline on a wheel route to Jonathan Taylor. Of course, this offense is playing well. They have very advantageous matchups against the Raiders this week and in the Houston Texans the following week. So Phillip Rivers could be a decent option going forward. Another option I want to mention, speaking of playing against the Raiders, Derek Carr. He's coming off of a fantastic fantasy game per se, but in terms of passing completion percentage, he was awful. 28 for 47 passing. He did have 381 passing yards, did have 3 passing touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown, but that doesn't, kind of give him the pass. He played against the Jets and barely had a victory. I mean, Adam Gase literally sold at the end. He said, okay, give him the win because we want the first pick. So as of right now, just seems to me like, sure, Derek Carr could be a value against the Indianapolis Colts. We did see Deshaun Watson produce against them, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to say the very least. So as of right now, I think Derek Carr, not a bad option, but one that you got to have to be just a little wary about because, again, he hasn't played well just recently. We have Teddy Bridgewater as our number 4 option. Again, he's coming off of a bye week, plays against the Denver Broncos this upcoming week. I think Teddy Bridgewater, again, is one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. If he gets Christian McCaffrey back, he's going to be that much more valuable. Again, if he's able to pass the ball 8 to 9 times a game in the direction of Christian McCaffrey, and McCaffrey catches about, I want to say like 90% of those, he's probably going to get an extra influx of 60, 70 receiving yards in Teddy Bridgewater's total that you typically don't see there. And on top of the fact that McCaffrey's got the ability to catch and go for a touchdown and get him extra value there. So I think Teddy Bridgewater, with the receivers that surround him, with the upcoming matchups, I think he's just in a very advantageous position rest of the season. Andy Dalton is my number 5. He gets to play against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 14. That in itself is a revenge game to say the very least. And I think if Andy Dalton, as pissed off as he probably is the way that they treated him in his tenure with the Cincinnati Bengals, the last time that, of course, he was on the Bengals prior to the trade deadline, and it was his birthday at the same time. Prior to the trade deadline, they literally were given notification from Andy Dalton's agent, hey, I want to be traded, and they just sat on their hands and said, no, we're not trading you. And they put no effort into it. And he pretty much got locked down there. Didn't get to go and move to a different team last year to maybe win a job or a contract elsewhere. So he's definitely pissed off about that. He'll be coming in with the Cowboys for a little bit of a revenge game. We have Baker Mayfield as our last option, of course, coming off of a fantastic game, 25 for 33 passing, 334 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. The reason I want to mention this isn't because of the Baltimore matchup, though I think he could produce against them. It is the Giants, it is the Jets in weeks 15 and 16 that I ultimately like as an option for Baker Mayfield. We move on to our final waiver wire targets, starting off with the defensive positions. We have our number 1, the Seattle Seahawks, taking on the New York Jets. Even though the New York Jets did end up forcing a lot of players who played the Raiders defense to cringe, very difficult. I mean, just, oh my God, it's hard to see that anybody could get 28 points dropped on their heads by the New York Jets for, I mean, I don't even understand what happened. But regardless, the Seattle Seahawks have a pretty good upcoming schedule. They've had back-to-back weeks of 9 fantasy points. They play against the Jets this upcoming week and the Washington football team the following week, the Rams in week 16, the first option as our defenses continue. We have the Kansas City Chiefs as our next option. Again, for those of you who have the Kansas City Chiefs already and played them against the Denver Broncos, I still think that they are a very good option only for this upcoming week against the Miami Dolphins. Tua has not looked great, and I think they'll be able to take care of a rookie quarterback and send a lot of pressure in his direction and really force him to make a couple mistakes here and there. The next option I wanted to, of course, suggest is the Cleveland Browns. Again, they've got 2 more weeks, or sorry, we've got 1 more week until we can 100% undoubtedly say that we're going to play their defense because, again, they do play Baltimore this week. You could end up getting value out of it. They did score 5 points against Tennessee's defense, even though they let Tennessee have a little bit of a hurrah comeback in the second half because, again, they were up 40 to 15, 40 to 17 at halftime. So either way, as of right now, Browns, we all know, I've been mentioning them for weeks. Not a bad option for week 15 and 16. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, rest of the season, I think they're not a bad option. They play against Minnesota in week 14. Minnesota struggled heavily with Jacksonville. Imagine what you're going to have to face against the Buccaneers that are preparing for 2 weeks to play against you. After that, they take on the Atlanta Falcons. Looked awful this past week, and that is the second time against the New Orleans Saints that they've looked bad. So that is, in fact, a possibility that you just have to go ahead and queue up exactly what the Saints did, implement it against Atlanta, you'll win. They'll be able to stop the run for sure. And then you got Detroit in the final week, in which, of course, you could stop the run and then force Stafford to make mistakes here and there. The next option I want to mention is the Carolina Panthers. Again, they take on the Detroit Lions this week. I don't like their week 15 matchup against the Green Bay Packers, but I do love their matchup against Washington in week 16. So 2 out of the next 4, not a bad option, of course, coming off of the bye, preparing for the Denver matchup. The last option I wanted to mention is the 49ers. They take on the Washington football team in week 14, Dallas in week 15, Arizona in week 16. 3 options, 3 games that they need to win out in order to make the fantasy or the actual NFL playoffs. And to be honest, they could be doing that based on how valuable their defense has been for them, and them getting a couple pieces here and there, a couple leaders back, could end up performing well for them. All right, those are my waiver wire targets for week 14 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you click the like button down below, comment down below. Those help me out a lot and does support me a lot. Outside of that, tomorrow we'll be talking about our top 36 running back rankings for the week 14 segment of this week. It's going to be very interesting to see how everything pans out, but I'm excited either way. Until tomorrow, I'll see you guys. Peace.